coming to you from the Edge Podcast Studios at South Mountain, Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome to the Edge Podcast with Mike G. Buckle up, Edge Nation. It's about to get real.
Eventually, you're going to write a book. Somebody's going to know who you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so your name is Mike Manrod.
Yep.
Is it Michael or Mike?
Mike.
Okay. And I happen to know your lovely mother. And
great lady.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
Mary. And she's an incredible artist as well. And so we know each other from a couple things that we did with a company called Landmark. And so, and those were beneficial experiences. But you came to me the other day, and we sat at the bar, and I don't even think you drank. I think I had a couple of beers, and I think maybe you had a spritzer or something. And we talked about this idea that human beings can be hacked. And I think that's what we got to. It didn't start out talking. That wasn't the kind of language we were using at first.
But yeah, fundamentally, the interesting idea is, we put a lot of effort into securing information systems, but perhaps sometimes we neglect the most important information system we have, the one behind our eyes.
Right. And I think it was, now you come to this not from, just like great thoughts that you have or whatever on the toilet. You're actually a security systems engineer. And you do some government work, and you actually look. And I'm going to go ahead and change this over so people could actually see you. You actually look like Ed Snowden a little bit.
That's funny. I was speaking at a venue out in Denver last week, and actually the receptionist hosting the event came up to me and said that same thing.
You look just like Ed Snowden.
So maybe I should be careful with that where I travel, make sure I don't get picked up by somebody.
Well, I mean, if I do a side by side, right? If I were to pull up a picture of side by side. So here's a picture of Ed Snowden, and there's a picture of you, and you don't look anything like him. But when you when you take the picture away, you actually do look a little bit like him. So it's kind of funny. Anyway, point being, he was a security engineer for the NSA, and also a contractor, also a former military. So the funny thing about Ed was that, he had real credentials. And,
rock star at what he did.
Coder. And so you're also at that level rock star of what you do. A little bit different, but you do for a lot of different contracts that you have. And we won't talk about that too much. Not like I'm trying to hide you.
Yeah.
But I think what's most important is that people know that you're real, that you're a real person, and and some of these ideas are next level. So it's kind of like when I first started looking at physics, and I started learning a little bit more about astrophysics, and I started learning a little bit more about the Higgs boson and all the other things that go along with understanding all of that, or at least trying to, right? It's weighty stuff. But when you start to think about the mind, right, and as I understand it, and I want you to tell us a little bit about your background there. When we talk about the mind, we're talking about a very different thing, but then we can see really interesting connectors between how we develop and design computer systems and how our minds work. There's some similarities there. So
definitely.
Do me a favor. Tell me a little bit about your background and what you do, and then also your college background, because you got a degree in philosophy as well, psychology.
Yeah, definitely. So my role right now is serving as a threat prevention subject matter expert, really just traveling around for a vendor and helping people solve their security problems, partnering up, whiteboarding things, strategizing how people are attacking, malware, tactics, intrusion, and then what we can do to fortify the defenses.
Oh, okay.
And so
that's how sexy is that? Is it as sexy as, like, you ever see that movie Hackers way back in the day?
Yeah. So no, not nearly that sexy. It's lots of typing up proposals and putting together Visios and whiteboarding.
Wow.
And lots of repeating the same activities over and over again, because a lot of people have the same problems. I think that's one of the really profound things, is they're ubiquitous. Whether I'm meeting with an organization with well over 100,000 employees, or somewhere with 100 employees, a hospital or a bank, a government or a school, it's all the same fundamental security problems for the most part when you boil it down.
Okay, that's interesting. And tell us a little bit about your psychology background. And
so my degrees, my associate and bachelor's had focus areas of psychology and health sciences. And just back in the day, I spent a lot of time reading and researching what seems like a lifetime ago now.
Yeah.
But, some of the ideas still kick around back there. And then you and I have participated in some work that's very cognitively focused in the past as well, and some conversations that kind of put that in a more relevant and immediate context.
Right. That's interesting. Go ahead.
So I mean, it's interesting, though. There's this convergence between cognitive sciences and computer sciences. We look at AI and the parallels between how computers think and how people think, and the differences. It's really fascinating, because when we look at a computer program or the higher level programming languages that we actually deal and interact with, we have methods to do things. We have variables that are bits of information, and then series of linguistic constructs, as Ada Lovelace envisioned way back in the day, that describe how these things interconnect and relate and process. So computers, the part that we care about, really are largely constructs of language. They're cognitive constructs.
Okay.
And those cognitive constructs come together, but they also have challenges and vulnerabilities and issues, as we all see in the news.
Well, we our own language,
Yeah.
our own linguistic constructs, I would say, have major problems with them as well. I mean, it's easy to misinterpret or misunderstand, right? Somebody, and when somebody says this thing and then changes the or frames it differently, I guess. Now you have a situation with language that doesn't work anymore because it's too vague. What I love about being an engineer is that I can take the plans for a network and I can hand it off to the Chinese, or I can hand it off to the Turkish or anybody, and if they understand the language of the engineer, they can actually create what it is that I put out. And that's what's beautiful about engineering design. Where I think is really curious is how do we quantify our own brains as computers? In other words, how then can we look at our brains and say, these are the functions of the brain that we actually designed as computers? We kind of like modeled the computing system through languages after the way the brain works, neural networks, etc. Right?
Right.
So talk about some of those. Talk about that convergence. I mean, really. And you said something the other day that shocked me, and I was a little bit fearful when you said it. But I'm not gonna steal your thunder here either. And I think you know what I'm talking about. So talk about that and the convergence, and then also talk about consciousness.
Definitely. If we look at consciousness, I mean, the convergence comes down in the sense that we really, our brains are analog computers with cognitive software. And any of us who've parented, which we've both done, can attest to, if we can raise our kids, and sometimes we even introduce cognitive software we didn't intend to.
That's right.
Daddy, I want a candy bar, or all those types of things, right?
Yeah.
So within that cognitive software, the similarities when we look at the higher level of both computing devices, even though the brain is an analog computer that's biochemical and has much we don't still even understand.
Right.
And the typical computer we're used to, sitting, we're carrying around in our duffel bags, or like people are leveraging to watch this podcast, are digital.
Right.
When we look at the higher level cognitive piece, they're all governed by language and ideas and interconnection of ideas.
Right.
And I mean, like we talked about the other night, it's very interesting as well to even talk about the point at which the cognitive constructs and information systems will actually wake up, as we look at in fiction, and when we'll have like a singularity event type thing. That's definitely something on our minds. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is that, you know, I mean, there are a lot of movies out there, and one of my favorites, I think, around this particular topic is iRobot. Right? It's the idea that a programmer and a maker developed a computer such that it had no choice but to become conscious.
Right.
That is the next evolution for that mechanism, right? So, and I think I sink back and I go, well, maybe was that how we became conscious? You know, I mean, the perfect, right? As humanity evolved, the perfect storm, if you will, of the way that we ate and the way that we lived and all of that, and our, you know, as we began to grow and evolve, it seems to me that at some point we definitely had consciousness occur on us, or we woke up, if you will.
Yeah, well, and there's the debate of when and if and how it happened for us as a species, but then there's that. Then we each do individually at some point as well, right? There's the point where the language, the linguistic constructs and the sophistication of our internal computing device reaches a tipping point, and all of a sudden we go from processing ideas and sensing and feeling to all of a sudden that takes off in a big way.
Yeah.
And you have the consciousness, the birth of identity. There's a very interesting book I read a long time back called The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, and it postulates some very interesting ideas about the arising
write that down.
It's okay. You can go back and rewatch it.
Okay.
But it's interesting. I don't necessarily subscribe to everything it postulates, but it begins to just contemplate the problem or the discourse of where does consciousness come to, how does it arise, and it's interesting to look at how consciousness arises within ourselves as we seek to understand, you know, how it would arise or could arise within an information system.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating conversation. I think we should probably deepen that at some point. But today, really, what we're here to do is we're here to talk about this idea that that you came to me with, and that is that our minds, being an analog computer, is hackable.